answer your question, and I will need some time to answer your questions. So if you want me to answer your
Go
question,
ahead.
I do in time to really to go into this. And I reiterate what I'm about to say. The main audience are students of knowledge who understand these issues. If you don't understand these issues and they're not going to bring you closer to Allah, there's not much benefit to hear these advanced stuff. As for the critics, may Allah guide you and me. If your intentions are the way that they are, it's not healthy to just want to be pouncing on people and misquoting. Let me try to take a step back. So I would like to state that as Allah is my witness, that whatever I taught throughout my life, I taught it sincerely, believing it to be the correct understanding and something that will bring people closer to Allah. I seek Allah's refuge from ever being double-faced, and I don't recall ever teaching something or saying something that I didn't firmly believe or was convinced about myself. So with that caveat, I think over the last, but the first khutbah I gave was 23, 24, 26, wow, subhanallah, no, it couldn't be, 26 years ago, subhanallah. So I have been lecturing and preaching and teaching for almost 3 decades, and I'm almost 45 now. My first khutbah was 16, so do the math there, so my first lecture was 16, and I'm now almost 45 now. So for 3 decades I have been teaching and preaching, and the internet came out and I was already active. So what that has done is it has recorded pretty much everything that I've done. And that's why you have the good and the bad, the positive, negative, all of it is out there. So as I evolve, the recording of my evolving also is there. And so people get a whole exposure to this. And I have evolved, and I've been very public about my own journeys out there. I wish I could take an advanced group of students and bring them with me. Unfortunately, that's not always possible to do. I'll try to do the next best thing, which is to not go into as much detail as this topic deserves. I'll just say the following. Throughout my Medina years, I was very much committed to the Athari Creed and to overall the da'wah of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, which I will call the Najdi da'wah. I don't mean anything derogatory, but we have to call it something. Let's call it the Najdi da'wah. I don't want to call it the term that its opponents call it, because that is a derogatory term. But the Najdi da'wah describes a geographic phenomenon. As you know, Mahin in particular, and others I wrote books on this. I taught lectures on this, Kitab al-Tawheed, Kashf al-Shubuhat, Qawaid al-Arba'a. Dare I say, to this day, nothing has been written in the English language that is more of an advanced defense of the Najdi da'wah than my critical analysis of shirk, which is still available in the English language. And I was genuinely sincere. But what I have discovered since then, and this is around a decade ago, and that's why I stopped teaching Light of Guidance, and Maghrib knows this, I stopped teaching, I said I can't do this anymore, is that I came to the realization that, by the way, I'm writing an academic book about Salafism as well right now, for an academic published, an academic book, so I'm doing a lot more research now than I did a decade ago. And to summarize, what I didn't know at the time was the following, that the Najdi da'wah can easily have, can be viewed to have gone through 3 phases. You have the first phase, the original phase, which is the phase of Ibn Abdul Wahhab and his immediate sons and grandsons, and the original, da'wah that started. And that da'wah, we'll get to that. The second phase is essentially King Abdul Aziz taming down the rebellion from within, because most people are aware vaguely that there was a civil war almost in Saudi Arabia, that King Abdul Aziz had to fight against his main allies who were defenders of Ibn Abdul Wahhab, because their view was that we need to go and conquer the world like our ancestors did. We need to wage jihad on the entire Muslim ummah and expand this thing called the Saudi Arabian kingdom. What is a kingdom? What is a geographic land? We need to go and fight all these infidels around us, meaning the other Muslim lands, like our ancestors did. King Abdul Aziz tamed them down, and a new strand developed. This strand is embodied by people like Mufti Muhammad ibn Ibrahim, the Grand Mufti before bin Baz. This is the second phase. The third phase is what we see now, and that is embodied by the famous scholars that most of us know. I have studied under some of them, and we admire and respect them immensely. Let's call this the third phase of the Najdi da'wah. Now, the third phase is tamed down. The third phase has expunged much of the more radical elements of the first phase, right? And that was the phase I was introduced to, and I fell in love with it. And I felt this to be the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the meaning of La ilaha illallah. Coming out of that environment and studying on my own and reading, I realized that the first phase and the third phase are radically different from one another. And Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab has doctrines and ideologies that the third phase dissociates from. The third phase says, no, he didn't really say that. He couldn't have said that. There's this tension that the third phase has with the first phase. And you even see this in my book, A Critical Study of Shirk, where there are things that he says, and then I say in the bottom, he couldn't actually have meant this. And that's what my teachers are teaching me. Don't take it at face value. I'll give you some simple examples. Ibn Abdul Wahhab fought decades of jihad in his lifetime. He and his group and army fought other people, conquered lands, expanded their lands under the name of jihad, not under the name of political war, under the name of jihad. Who was he fighting? He was fighting fellow Muslims. Who did he consider these people to be? Kuffar and infidels. He never once raised his sword against the British, against the Dutch, against any colonialist powers. His view was that the Ottoman Empire in its totality was a pagan empire. Dawla mushrika kafira. And that anybody who supported the Ottoman Empire ipso facto automatically became a murtad or a kafir. And in his view, therefore, anyone who supported the Ottomans against him, anyone, in fact, his famous 10 principles, Nawaqid al-Ashara, one of them is very clear. مَنْ لَمْ يُكَفِّرِ الْكَافِرِ أو شَكَّ حَتَّى فِي كُفْرِهِ, right? فَهُوَ كَافِرٌ. Whoever doesn't consider the kafir to be a kafir, or doubts if the kafir is a kafir, that person is a kafir. Now, theoretically, that sounds technically correct. Who does he mean when he says whoever doesn't consider kafir to be a kafir or doubts whether that kafir is a kafir? He doesn't mean people that worship idols. He doesn't mean people that are, followers of another faith tradition. He means the Ottoman Empire. He means the Muslims around him. Whoever considers these people not to be kafir is a kafir. Think about the repercussions. And that's why there are plenty of statements in his own writings where he indicates that the only group of people who are truly upon Tawheed are his followers. If you want to see what first wave Najdi Da'wah is, right? Have you heard of the book Millat Ibrahim by Abu Ibrahim al-Maqdisi, Abu Muhammad al-Maqdisi, right? Mm-hmm. Abu Muhammad al-Maqdisi's book is essentially a modern manifestation of first wave Najdi theology. Have you heard of Abu Mus'ab al-Suri and other of these clerics of the more radical side of the fringe of the jihadist movements? These clerics, they tap in to the teachings of Ibn Abdul Wahhab and his notion of wala and bara. And that notion of wala and bara was basically, if you're with the Ottomans, and that means you're not with his group, then you are not just a deviant, you are a kafir. Now, whether he made takfir al-ayn or takfir al-wasf, that's a debate. But the point is, the default is you're not a Muslim. And that is why this ideology was considered to be deviant by everybody else in the world. You want to ask me what my position is? Listen to me carefully, and refuters, please quote this. Quote this. I am a follower of Imam al-San'ani and Imam al-Shawkani in their verdicts on this person. Imam al-San'ani and Imam al-Shawkani are great scholars of Sunni Islam. And some of them initially got some positive views about Ibn Abdul Wahhab, and so they supported him. When they saw the reality, al-Shawkani, the great scholar of Yemen, a great allama, al-Shawkani wrote a letter to the king at the time, the second manifestation of the Saudi Empire. He wrote a letter to the king, the emir, and it was publicized that basically, I'm paraphrasing obviously, is like, bro, chill. And that was his letter. Your group is taking things that might be bid'ah and making it into kufr. Taking things that might be wrong and killing Muslims as a result of this. That was his basic message. And that's my message as well. I'm not saying, a'udhu billah, that we should go worship or pray to the grave. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not saying we make our dua to the dead. But I'm saying that what this individual did in waging jihad and considering the rest of the ummah to be kafir is essentially what ISIS is doing in our times. The same mentality of everybody's a kafir unless it's us. Let me quickly finish up. I know you guys have to interject your thing. The second wave tried to tone that down, and that's Muhammad Ibrahim, and he was much more hardcore. You read his fatwa, I have them literally behind me, his fatwa, you can read them. Very great alim, but second wave. And then the third wave is toning that down even more and bringing it many notches down. I was introduced to third wave. Third wave gives you a lens, it gives you glasses to look at the first wave with. You don't really see the first wave the way that it was. How will you see the first wave the way that it was? Oh, advanced students of knowledge, this is my advice to you. Don't look at the writings of Ibn Abdul Wahhab without also looking at the history of what he did. Let his actions speak louder than later interpretations of his words. That's my message to the advanced students. I repeat, let his own actions, what he did to his fellow Muslims, how he justified attacking villages, how he viewed the Ottoman Empire and the entire Ummah as being outside the fold of Islam, even if there's udr bil jahl, but they're no longer Muslim. Why? Because of things that he considered to be kufr akbar, shirk akbar, and the majority of the Ummah did not consider to be kufr akbar, shirk akbar. My point is as follows. The Najdi da'wah took its basis in the Athari creed, no doubt. But it is my contention and the contention of Ash-Shawkani and of As-San'ani and of many ulama, including many of the Hanbali ulama of the time frame, including some of the great Hanbalis of the city of Ahsa, such as their Sheikh, the great alim Ibn Afaliq, one of their greatest muftis, a great Hanbali scholar who was Athari in his creed. But he wrote a refutation of Ibn Abdul Wahhab, which again I have in my library and it's available online, that he became a critic of Ibn Abdul Wahhab from the Athari strand, not from the other strand of Islam. I'm actually writing an academic paper which has been going on for many years, the differences between Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Abdul Wahhab. And there are profound differences. Of them, the most important one, Ibn Taymiyyah did not make takfir of his opponents that did the same things that the opponents of Ibn Abdul Wahhab did, and he made takfir and made them halal them. So, to respond to part one of your question, I have to admit, I no longer consider myself to be a follower of Ibn Abdul Wahhab, where I used to 15 years ago. But 10 years ago, around 10 years, or more than a decade ago, facts became clear to me that, and I said, and the fault is my own, but I will say third wave Najdi da'wah sanitizes first wave Najdi da'wah. And that's why the average third wave Najdi da'wah student is in denial. No, Ibn Abdul Wahhab didn't consider himself to be the only Muslim group in the world. Yes, he did. Go read his writings and look at what he did. Look at his level of understanding when he said, and this is quoted from his writings, when he said, no one understood Tawheed, including any of my teachers, before I came along. This is what he himself says in his own writings. This is a level of fanaticism, and the takfir is a level of neo-Kharijism that I simply cannot tolerate. To consider the entire ummah to be kafir and mushrik other than yourself is not mainstream Islam. And so I believe that I was taught a version of his da'wah, that's third wave, because third wave doesn't teach that, right? Third wave is much better than first wave. Third wave is still kind of sort of, it's removed much of the fanaticism of the first wave because they have to. I mean, you can't live in the modern world. The second wave beginning tried to, right? King Abdul Aziz literally had to turn his secular troops against his religious troops. There was a civil war between the ulama, basically, and between the secular Baddu followers, the Bedouin followers, that their loyalty is to the secular Abdul Aziz, not to the religious figure. There was a war. What was that war over? The war was over the interpretation of the Najdi da'wah. And the first Najdi da'wah basically was eliminated, thus giving rise to the second Najdi da'wah. But even the second Najdi da'wah, it was still too fanatical for living in the modern world. And so by the 60s, that too had to be toned down immensely. Now we have the third. Dare I say we're witnessing a fourth wave if you look at the current guy in office, but I don't want to say too much because I do want to get a Saudi visa. So we move on to your next question.
Sheikh, as a follow-up, going back, because would it be safe to say that you kind of built your brand on the works of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab?
In my 20s, yes.
True. So I would say there's certain, because, you have your Kitab al-Tawheed series and the books that you alluded to.
In my 20s, yes. But definitely, even when I came back from Medina, what I wanted to do at that stage, in my early 30s, what I wanted to do was to spread a more modern understanding of the Athari creed, right? And at that stage, I'm talking about my early 30s now, I'm in my mid 40s, in my early 30s, at that stage, I was still under the presumption that Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Abdul Wahhab represent the same trend. Whereas now I differentiate between the two. And I don't view Ibn Abdul Wahhab as being a faithful, he wanted to be, I mean, I'm not denying that. He thought maybe he was, I'm not denying that. But I think it is patently clear, and I'm currently writing an article about this, I think it is very clear. And all you need to do is look at the writings and look at the way that Ibn Taymiyyah treated his opponents, some of whom justified making dua to Allah, meaning calling to the dead, right? Some of Ibn Taymiyyah's opponents, read his book, Al-Istighatha wa Rad al-Bakri, right? Al-Bakri is one of the scholars that said it's okay to make tawassul through the dead. Ibn Taymiyyah, read his book on that, cover to cover. And it's definitely harsh, but he never considered Bakri to be a kafir, halal ad-dam, go and execute him, wage jihad against him. So I'm not pro calling out to the dead. It's haram to call out to the dead. It is a stepping stone to shirk. It is an evil bid'ah. But to consider anybody who does that automatically to be committing kufr akbar, no, that's not correct. And that's a different, more detailed topic that we can talk about later on. And that's the position that I argue is Ibn Taymiyyah's. Now, again, I know there's going to be advanced students of knowledge. They're going to jump into Ibn Taymiyyah's books, find quotations here and there. And I know these quotations, astaghfirullah, I'm not trying to brag or boast, but I've spent 20 years of my life reading Ibn Abdul Wahhab and Ibn Taymiyyah. I know these two people, individuals, more than any other scholar of Islam, because I read their writings right behind. I don't know how much you can see. All of that is Ibn Taymiyyah, all of that is Abdul Wahhab. These are the people I studied intensely for years and years. And I know their writings, and I know there are phrases you will find that can be interpreted here and there. More importantly, look at their actions. How did Ibn Taymiyyah treat in his own lifetime the people who tried to justify some of these bid'ahs, versus how did Ibn Abdul Wahhab deal with the entire world that was outside of his group of followers? Simple as that.
What was your emotional state when you come across this epiphany about Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab like 10 years ago?
I'll be honest. I mean, there's no question. Like Sim said, I mean, you do feel a sense of hurt and pain. And that's why I understand when some of the younger neophytes, when they hear me speak and they are used to the old YQ, I totally sympathize with their pain. Wallahi, I do. It's understandable. I can't, a'udhu billah, be double-faced and pretend I'm somebody whom I'm not. When I taught you that 15 years ago, that's who I was. And do I regret that phase? I mean, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for that phase. So I don't know how, I mean, I'm no longer that. I had to go through my own evolution, and I have no doubt 15 years from now, I'm going to continue learning more and fine-tuning my views, or maybe even radically changing. And when that happens, you'll hear me speak on that platform. Inshallah, my goal is that Allah Azza wa Jal always show us the truth as truth and make us of those who preach what we view as the truth. Whatever I have said or done, I can honestly say that inshallah, I never said anything about the religion of Islam except that I genuinely felt it to be the truth. I never ever catered a doctrine or a fatwa to please the masses, and I seek refuge in Allah. Wallahi, I will happily lose all my quote-unquote followers and whatnot if they don't like what I have to say. I'm not going to shy away, and you've seen this in the recent controversies. Let people do whatever they want. I'm not going to shy away from telling them. Either I'll be quiet, which is a valid perspective, we can get to that, why I'm not quiet or whatnot, or I will speak what I believe is the truth. I will never ever cater Islam to the masses. A'udhu billah from that.
Do you still wear the purple kurta? Do you regret that at all?
Like, what the heck? I do have a purple kurta still. What's wrong with the purple kurta?
No, nothing at all. I'm just wondering if you've dropped that as well, then you really changed.
Bro, I still eat only zabiha meat. You heard that, Mahin? Huh?
Yeah.
Zabiha meat, still upon the haqq, bro. On zabiha.
Sheikh,
can't change that. That's clear in my opinion. Anyway,
would you still identify yourself as an Athari?
I am Athari as much as I am Hanbali. What do I mean by this? Look, you cannot reinvent the wheel entirely. We have 14 centuries of tradition. You cannot ignore 14 centuries of tradition. You cannot just pretend as if you have no idea what happened since the time the Quran came down up until 1441 or 2019, whatever year we're in. You can't do that. You have this massive, beautiful history and legacy that is between you and the actual revelation. So, I am Hanbali overall in my fiqh, But did Allah reveal the Hanbali madhab? Obviously not. Allah did not reveal the Hanbali madhab. Allah revealed the Quran, He sent a prophet. Ulama came, theologians came, Sahaba came, Tabi'un came, great ulama, and they looked at this and they said, okay, what's fiqh? How do we do this? What's usul? And they extracted from this divine revelation, they extracted multiple systems, right? And these multiple systems are great, alhamdulillah. And in the end of the day, really, one person cannot reinvent the wheel in every single facet of Islam. So it makes no sense for the average Muslim to come after 14 centuries to say, I'm going to reject all the madhabs and quote unquote go back to the Quran and Sunnah, which was, as you know, the Salafi slogan of the 90s. We saw what that meant. It meant go back to Albani or Bin Baz. It didn't mean you can't go back to the Quran and Sunnah without the intermediary of human agency, right? So I am Hanbali to this day, meaning if I need to look up a quick issue of fiqh for my own life without having to research extensively, I'm going to turn to my Hanbali madhab books, which are right there, and just quickly look it up and say, okay, khalas, this is my generic madhab that I follow and I'm comfortable with. And I chose the Hanbali madhab not just because I studied it the most out of all of the madhabs, but also because I found it to be the most, like there's always opinions that you can kind of find in between. So there's riwayat of the Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, which is well known. So I chose it because I actually found it to be also conducive to me. But I'm not a diehard Hanbali. I have no problems once in a while saying, you know what, in this particular issue, the Hanbali madhab, I might not necessarily follow the Hanbali madhab on this issue. So I've said this in the British interview, which I guess you didn't, you guys don't listen to because there's your competitors. I said it in a and I'll say it on your interview because you don't like your competitors' interviews. I said the Salafi da'wah, the Athari da'wah was really good in educating its followers that the madhabs were a human construct. The average Salafi very well understood very well that the madhabs are human constructs. They are not from Allah and His Messenger. And so even if you're the Bin Baz Salafi or the Albani Salafi, meaning the madhab base, either you take one madhab and generally follow it or you reject all the madhabs, you kind of sort of understood, look, these madhabs are man-made and they're all good and they're trying to come closer to Allah and His Messenger, but they're not from Allah and His Messenger. I said the Salafis were great at doing that. However, the way that Salafis teach their followers about theology, academically it's not sound. They teach their followers that their theology, which is essentially post-Najdi third wave Najdi da'wah, was the theology of the Sahaba. That's the understanding the average Salafi has. That the great Sahaba, the Tabi'un, they had the same understanding as we do after 14 centuries. And so they actually believe that essentially Allah revealed the Salafi theology. They wouldn't say it that way, but they do kind of sort of romanticize, even more than that. They make it a shibboleth. They make it like something that is unchallenged. And this is where, again, I have to say, I'm not saying that's, look, the average Muslim has to follow a madhab, right? So the average Muslim should be a Hanbali or an Athari, a Hanbali and an Athari, or a Shafi'i and an Ash'ari, no problem. But the advanced students of knowledge need to understand that all of these are ulama attempting to derive from the nusus. Even the Athari creed is something that slowly developed over time. Now that's something that is shocking to the Salafi to hear. And we do require an advanced class. And I know this one phrase is going to bring about a gazillion refutations. They're going to quote Fulan and Allan and Sheikh Qadhi. Jazakallah khair, I appreciate that. But you're quoting from within the tradition to defend the tradition. Give me any group of students that are open-minded. Give me a semester with them, and I will prove to you beyond this. And I have students, by the way. I'm teaching at the Islamic Seminary, and let's talk to them. I'm teaching at other places that are not online. Talk to them. I have advanced students. With these students, you show them the clear development. You show them that a later scholar comes with something an earlier scholar rejected. I'll give you the most simplistic example, which I know will generate a lot of controversy because people are not aware, and it's going to be a 2-minute example. But Imam Ahmad and Imam Bukhari and their positions on the Quran. What Imam al-Bukhari said about the Quran that caused all the controversy that it did, right? If you know the story of Bukhari and what happened with Yahya al-Dhuhali. Imam Yahya al-Dhuhali was essentially defending the hardcore Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal position. And Imam al-Bukhari is developing and fine-tuning and pushing it forward. And Imam al-Dhuhali is on the old school. No, we're not going to do that. It's what Imam Ahmad said. And he's quoting Imam Ahmad against Imam al-Bukhari. Whereas the both of them studied under Imam Ahmad, right? But Imam al-Bukhari is like, well, we got to read. And then ironically, Imam Bukhari's position becomes orthodoxy. What Imam al-Bukhari said eventually becomes, and we can give you so many other examples. Now, this topic deserves an entire series of lectures, and I do that in the advanced circles. This should not be put on YouTube. So I don't want people to misunderstand me. I believe the Athari creed, as manifested by great ulama from earliest of times, is a really beautiful creed. It's a simple creed, and by simple, I don't mean a pejorative. Some of our brothers, they're jumping on any word and reading in a negative. Brothers, medieval is not a pejorative. Medieval is a time frame. I say classic, I say pre-modern, I say medieval. Astaghfirullah, but study English. The primary meaning of medieval is a time frame. A secondary meaning, which you have to read into, is a negative meaning. I agree with you. But the primary meaning of classical, pre-modern, modern, and medieval are time frames. So when I say the classical ulama, that's not a negative. When I say the medieval, it's not a negative. It's simply a time frame. There's a classical, the first 200-300. You have the medieval, the next 400. You have the pre-modern, then you have the modern, the four primary epochs. Now, I was saying the Athari creed is definitely the first and the earliest developed Sunni creed. It predates the Ash'ari creed by around 100 years. No question about it. But the Athari creed in its totality does not go back to the Sahaba themselves. The Sahaba did not think about these issues the way that 100 years later people thought about them. To presume that they held the same doctrines as Imam Ahmad did is a presumption. It is something you read in based on an ambiguous quote. We do not know what the Sahaba actually felt about many issues. We don't know because those questions were not posed to them. And so I don't have a problem at all with the Athari creed. The default is I'm Athari still. And it is my area, the one area I can genuinely say that I am, inshallah, a world-class researcher, because I spent 10 years, my master's, my PhD is early Sunni theology. That's what I did. I read, no exaggeration, hundreds of articles and books and whatnot. That's my expertise. My master's dissertation, go read it in Medina. My PhD dissertation, go read it. My first chapter of 100 pages is about the development of the Ash'ari school and its relationship with the Athari school. That's my 100 pages in English about this development. I know that phase inside out. And that was when I began thinking things through. And again, this slur, I went to Yale, that's such a cheap slur. Bro, I have a brain. I can think, I can read. And it's what I'm doing. I'm reading, I'm thinking. I knew more than my teachers at Yale about any topic of Islam. They did it, but they're simply there and we're talking and whatnot. And I'm the one thinking. I'm the one coming to these conclusions, not them. My conclusions are different than their conclusions because I'm thinking things through. What I have, you can read this in the book, in the dissertation, which is not in print, but a lot of people have the PDF for some reason. You can read this there, and that is that the Ash'ari school and the Athari school, they did have some tensions going on between them, but these tensions are contemporaneous. Imam Ahmad is there, and the proto-Ash'ari school is already developing. What gives us the right to privilege Imam Ahmad over the other school is because of our personal bias and love towards Imam Ahmad. The point being, Atharism and Ash'arism are both developments of the 2nd, 3rd, 4th century of Islam. I still say Atharis predate Ash'aris by a generation or two. And I have to go into a little bit of a dig here, fellow Ash'ari students. I'm not saying this as somebody who used to be Athari, but it's not fair when you neglect and ignore the many dozens of Athari creeds that were written before Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari was even born. It's not correct when you say that the majority of the Ummah was Ash'ari. No, the majority of the Ummah for 150 years was Athari in terms of theology. Then Ash'ari creed came along, and my dissertation discusses this actually, that how the Ash'ari creed supplanted the Athari creed was an act of politics. But when you read all of this and you study it to that level, you realize, you know what? Allah didn't reveal the Athari creed or Aqeedah Tahawiyya or Imam Ahmad's theology, and he didn't reveal Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari. These are people that are trying to extract from the revelation advanced aspects of theology that the revelation can be interpreted either way for. The bottom line, And Allah knows what's going to happen with this 5 minutes that I've just said. May Allah protect me and you and all of us. And brothers, please calm down. Even if you want to refute, ya akhi, please. We're all Muslims praying to Allah, reading the Quran, loving the Sunnah. And subhanAllah, even my worst critics out there, as long as you're within the mainstream of Islam, inshallah, we'll be together in Jannah forever and ever and ever if Allah forgives my sins and yours. So why all this animosity and hatred? We will be together in Jannah. My talk here is not meant to the hardcore Salafis or hardcore Ash'aris or hardcore anybody's. Be easygoing and understand these are human developments. To conclude this question, bro, I am Athari insofar as I'm Hanbali. But Atharism is not divinely revealed. And 15 years ago, I was Athari and I felt Ash'aris were deviants. You know this, Mahin. I taught you this 15 years ago, right?
Correct.
15 years ago, I thought the Maturidis and whatnot were bad people, even if Allah will forgive them and whatnot. That's gone from my heart completely. Atharis and Ash'aris, in my humble opinion, subhanAllah, these two groups have been around for 1,000+ years. Look at them. You find amongst them righteous, zahid, ubad, muttaqi. You find amongst them so mediocre. You find amongst them fasaqa and fajara. The creeds themselves have not perversely or positively immediately impacted all of their followings. Do you understand what I'm saying here? The creeds themselves are there, and the followers of both of these creeds generally are on the same spectrum of religiosity. Some are great, some are this, some are average, some are whatnot. So to consider these advanced doctrines of creed to be so important, so much so that you look down in your heart, even if you don't say so, at a Muslim who has a different interpretation, I believe this is the problem. But just like I don't look down at the Shafi'i, at the Maliki, at the Hanafi, at all, even if I myself am predominantly Hanbali, similarly, my heart has nothing negative and evil now against somebody who's an Ash'ari or a Maturidi or a Tablighi or a Deobandi or a Jamati or a Ikhwani. All of these groups have good in them, all of them. And they might have some bad as well. None of them are revelations from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and all of them are attempts to bring about good in the ummah. That's what I look at. That's my current attitude. By the way, this has been called post-Salafism by modern researchers, and there's an element of truth to that.